Welcome to the Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help individuals and teams develop self-knowledge, self-awareness, and transformational habits. We recorded this episode with our new partner, Susan York, before the COVID-19 crisis, but I think a lot of this is important right now. Because of everything going on, we have scheduled 2 free webinars with our team about how to respond now. The podcast is great, but we want to deal with some of these things as they come up in real time. You can register for both of these events at our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. So some of you are in crisis right now, and this Thursday's webinar, March 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be doing the webinar and talking about communicating in a crisis, as well as self-care in a crisis. However, for others of you, the world has actually slowed down and you have some time on your hands. For those of you who are in a season that has slowed, it's a really good time and a really good idea to build a better foundation with that gift of time for whatever comes next. The webinar we are hosting on Thursday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time will be about functioning well as a team in work environments. You can register for one or both of those free webinars at our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. If you need support during this time, you can even schedule a one-off coaching session with us. Go to www.theartofgrowth.org and email us to set up a time. For today, though, we are excited to introduce you to Suzanne York, who is joining us at just the right time, I think, for the work this year will require. Suzanne is the founder of Humans Optimized, and you'll hear more about her in the next couple weeks. So let's get to it.
All right, well, welcome to the Art of Growth. I am so excited to have you, Suzanne.
All of the above. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Let's say a little bit about why you're here. We met through a mutual friend. Mm-hmm. When I sat down, we began talking about what we do. And I talked about my coaching. You talked about your coaching. And what I found myself, to my utter surprise, was that what I was saying, you were taking it beyond where I was. Like I would say something, you would take it to the next level. And I'd go, dang, that's like, I seldom run into that. And so then I thought, well, sometimes that happens as maybe an anomaly. As we kept talking, the more I'd say about something, you would say, yes, and you would go take it further. And I thought, oh my, I think we have somebody that could run with us as a team. So we began talking more and we discovered there were so many synergies that were taking place and points where we were meeting and coming at from 2 different points, but meeting in the middle. And so that was super exciting. What was your sort of like,
it was
did you have a similar sort of take on it or different? Or
very similar. It was a very unique encounter for me as well. Not a lot of people can go in different directions around a certain topic, and I found that we could talk about everything from the more intellectual side of it all the way down to the heart and what you would want to do around ideas that we were coming up with. And so to have that multifaceted conversation, that was unique for me too. So really fun.
Yeah, and we've been focusing for quite a while at the Art of Growth on a lot of the personal transformations. When we have a panel of the same type in the room, like letting them speak for themselves. We've talked a lot about the home life, and we've really wanted to explore more about the work life and teams at work, because that is such a personal element of your life. You spend a lot of those times with people. So Joel mentioned meeting Suzanne to me, and he's like, you got to meet her. I think she would work well with us. And I'm like, whoa. All right, let me just kind of meet. And I think about 15 minutes, 20 minutes into the conversation between the 3 of us, and I was like, oh yeah, like the 3 of us need to do something. We need to talk about this. Mm-hmm. We need to get microphones in front of us. I was wishing we had microphones in front of us for that conversation.
Yeah, that was a cool one.
Because I was like, our audience would be, hugely benefited by, the personal element, the relational element, the work and element, the team element. And so we're like, well, how do we talk about this? And we still don't entirely know, but that's what we turned on mics.
That's great. Let's do it.
And we're like, let's do this a little bit. But Suzanne, let people get to know you a little bit about what, like, your background a little bit and where you come from, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of me to share. I think it starts with, I know we'll talk a lot about profession, but I'm a mom. I've got 2 young kids. I've grown up in New England, and I love the area. And from a work standpoint, I've spent 20 years in corporate America, working for some really amazing brands. And I've had some incredible opportunities to go deep in certain areas, but also to take on some global work and get to know the different cultures around the world. So that work has been incredibly exciting for me. And I have gotten a lot of training and expertise in the area of organizational change management. And that's a field in and of itself. And there's certifications around that and methodologies. Sure. So I've been able to go deep in that arena and have found a real passion for helping organizations through times of transformation. As I've done different initiatives, it's been interesting for me to see the people side of these, the human reaction to these changes that are coming to the workplace. What does it mean to them as individuals? How do they connect as teams? Where do they fit into the bigger picture? And the reactions that people have that are very innate to who we are as people. Change is not something we have invited as a human species, because back in the day, change meant a literal threat to our survival. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, modern day survival looks different. It's no longer will there be safety around, animals coming out of the trees and forest, but safety from a psychological standpoint, safety from an acceptance and belonging standpoint. Yet the brain reacts in the same way to threats to that safety as they do to our actual survival. So I've gotten really curious about change and the dynamics of change. And through that work, we would put together some really engaging organizational change management plans. And I was finding that different parts of the company would respond to the change in different ways. And I got curious about that. Well, what was different from one area of the business to the other? Because ostensibly it was the same messaging, the same change we were trying to drive, and yet the adoption was very different depending on where you were. Sure. So I got curious and dug a little deeper and found that the role of teams played such a critical part in moving an organization forward. And so the system, the direct system that individuals work in, their ability to adapt their ways of working and how they relate to one another really made a difference, how resilient they were to the changes that were coming and how open and ready they were to take them on. So from there, I went deep on team performance coaching, which is another arena with a methodology certifications and schooling around that. And so I do a lot of work now in what's called team performance coaching. And in doing that, it's helping teams understand, well, what's our mission as a group of individuals? And what do we want to do to structure ourselves around that mission and learn how to relate to one another in order to achieve our goals and enjoy the ride along the way?
I think that's the enjoy the ride along the way is really inspiring, because I think for generations, it just wasn't an option.
No.
There was survival options, and it was just you just showed up and listened to whatever the boss said, and if you did a good job, you had a long-term career, and the whole landscape has changed, and we want different things now. And I think that one of the things that makes me engage in one place and withdraw in another is like being seen and wanting to. That's a big part of the Enneagram, is wanting to be able to see the other for who they are and not just as our perception of them. And if groups of people are going to accomplish something worthwhile, meaningful, that they can really put their heart behind over the long term, they want all those, not just the triple bottom line, but all the bottom lines of being seen, being appreciated, being valued for who you are, and not just as someone would want you to be. And then when a team can actually function and do that together, like there's something that's just multiplied, because we are such a community-driven species.
Right.
We are not individualistic, and so much of individualism has dominated some of the work culture. There's been individual experts, but it's a whole nother level when you talk about the complexity of globalization, of the technologies that we're all now connected in. It makes things more complicated because we actually have to function in a community, maybe even a way we didn't have to 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Right.
And so you're working on really complicated structures, but these are going to be necessary for people to actually enjoy their work, be fulfilled in their work, be sustainable in their direction. And I think that is just such a key part of our heart too, because if corporate America was an emotionally compelling, enjoyable place to work in, it's been sort of downplayed or demonized, and like we'll have no part of that because there's so much beautiful potential in that world.
Yeah.
And like I think we want to talk about like how do we better engage that?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. And you talk about meaning, and work was not the meaning-making engine for people many, many years ago. And now it is. The expectation that employees have of meaningful work, I think, is driving the right conversations and the right initiatives inside of companies so that we really can aspire to what you talked about.
What was interesting to you in our conversation about the Enneagram? What sort of was compelling to you about that?
Well, through the work I've done with teams, I've used many different what I call psychometric tools. So whether it's MBTI, Insights, I've used Strengths Finders, and they're all very helpful in helping create a common language around a topic about a person. So you could get some reflection on who you are and how you show up, and you can learn a little bit more about someone else. But after those sessions, what I was finding is it wasn't very sticky. So the terminology didn't really resonate beyond that moment in time. And so to really indoctrinate it into the way that you talk about your relationships with one another with the team, I wasn't seeing it have the sustainability I wanted. When I came across the Enneagram, it was so relatable and so much more steeped in, you've talked about it, the wisdom. And that to me made it easier to remember, well, what is it about myself and about other people that I can learn through this model that for some reason seems to resonate with me a lot more than the other ones that I've used? And I actually would love to ask you guys, what is it about the Enneagram that does make it that much more
I saw that look
compelling?
in your eyes, like the big question mark, like, what is going on there that it would be so sticky for you and sticky for other people? Yeah, I don't know that I have a comprehensive answer. I think it's funny that you talk about these other systems that have that are not sticky, and the Enneagram seems more relatable. I think about the name itself, Enneagram. It's like such a difficult name for people.
It is, isn't it?
Right? And
is it in the world of Instagram? I mean, Instagram, Enneagram. It's not that
right.
Yeah, but like
we're getting used to that stuff.
How do you spell that? A-N-Y? No, is it,
that's how my voice text spells it.
Yeah.
I'm always like, no, come on, you got to learn this word.
Yeah, remember it,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I'll take a stab at it, and Jim, you take a stab at it as well. I think that the Enneagram doesn't create a system. Like, I think a lot of the other systems that are out there, personality tools, it's attempting to create a structure, a system based upon fairly modern understanding of human beings. And it feels like a box for a lot of folks. And so they have to remember that box. This is the box, a category that's sort of a one-size-fits-all. Even though some of them have, MBTI has 4 letters assigned to you, and there's quite a few variations of those. When the Enneagram emerged, first of all, roughly about 1,500 years ago, perhaps even further back than that. We don't know. But it's a body of wisdom about human behavior that's been around for a long time that is about self-reporting. It's how people reported themselves. And so if you imagine over centuries of people reporting themselves, you start to get a sense of personality that has a core motivation that tends it doesn't change. That part doesn't change. And a certain pattern that comes along with it. In terms of the external behaviors, those are as infinite as the human race is. There's a lot of different variations. And so when people land on it, they land on something that has been true of them at a deep level. It is revealing what's always been there and not telling them something that perhaps is, this is how I behave. This is how you experience me. It's much more about this is how I experience me, but was unaware of it or was not awakened to it until I saw it. And when you see it, then it's, oh my, this is me at a core level, the part that I've sort of pushed to the shadow, and didn't want to see. And I think that's why as soon as you see it, you can't unsee it, which is different than if I present to you a set of numbers based on your behavior. Like, this is how you are. You're an extrovert. You're an introvert. You tend towards being affable. You tend towards being conscientious. I mean, all sorts of language that's true. That's true about me, I guess, in a certain way. And all of it's wonderful, as you said. It's very helpful. But I think this reflects more of that inner core that you've always known to be true, but just kind of pushed to the shadow side.
Yeah, it is very revealing, and in a good way. Like, I felt very seen as I started to go deeper in the work. And, at some point I'll share a little more of my personal journey that has helped me really appreciate what the Enneagram can bring. And we can go there at some point.
Yeah, when we've coached people that are around the world, not just in American culture, the fact that the types show up, there's cultural overlays, but you can still spot it. You can still spot those core motivations. You can do that. And I think one of the biggest differences about the Enneagram is it is global. So there is a sort of a global sense to it. It didn't just come from like psychologists in the West.
Right.
And I think because a lot of the systems they were made by people observing a particular, aspect of the culture and making observations and then categorizations about that and then putting that back on. That's different than the Enneagram, which is self-reporting, which is you tell us who you are. And there's been enough time for that data to sort of emerge on its own. And so I think one is put upon and one is a calling forth. And I think the Enneagram is a calling forth of who you are, show us who you are, tell us who you are, and do these other things work for you. But you still are your unique expression of your type. But those core motivations are there. Those things that are driving you are there. And this is something we'll dive into at different points in time. But we know in working with companies and with bosses, they want to know how to motivate their people. But if they don't know what motivates them, they can't possibly do that. And so I think that's why this tool has the potential for so much impact in marriages, in parenting, in corporates, in dealing with your boss, in dealing with your employees, just across the board, because it does have that calling forth aspect to it.
Yeah, it is. It's also very freeing because it gives you a little bit more about the why behind what you do. When you're looking through your lens, you don't really see the lens. And so this calls attention to the lens you're viewing the world, through which you're viewing the world. And I have found the deeper I go with this, the more I say, hey, wow, that is what the Enneagram told me is what part of my core motivations that I'm somewhat blind to. And now I have a choice. Do I want to do this and keep on the path that I'm on, or do I want to make a different choice? And that awakening has been really empowering for me personally.
Yeah, we often call that like being in default mode versus design.
Yes.
So much of our reactions and our interactions with the world, they're on default. And we are living life with less choice if we do not have the awareness to make the choice. And I think that's one of the gifts of the Enneagram is it actually tells you, no, you actually have a decision. You don't have to react that way. You don't have to respond to your boss that way when he says that. You actually might have a little more insight into that person and have a little more empathy and understanding for where that person's coming from and better know how to address their motivations. Like all of those things, suddenly there's options on the table where there was just patterns of behavior. There was things that were an automatic, and now you actually get to design the way you interact with another human being.
Yeah. And, you can't really address motivation until, particularly if you think about the workplace and if you're a CEO and you're looking at your employees and you're trying to figure out, we've done all these personality tests. This one is supposed to be super conscientious, right? But sometimes they're not. And if they're conscientious, that means that maybe they're motivated by, I don't know, having more detail, having more information that they need, or having more time to be conscientious. It's guesswork. And you could have somebody that's conscientious simply because they were raised that way, but maybe their true motivation is, I'm trying to be helpful. And if conscientiousness means helpful, I will be that for you. And if you don't understand that, you're not addressing the core motivation.
Right.
And so that person burns out. and then they, stop being as productive, and that creates a problem for the organization. So these are the sorts of things that, we could dive into. What I wanted to talk to you about was, it was so fascinating to me. I mean, a couple of reasons why, or 3 reasons why I think we thought this makes sense for the 3 of us.
Yeah.
Right? One of them was Jim and I'm a 7, Jim is an 8, right? So we're head and body. And for us, we've always had a value to have a 3-centered approach, both individually, like I'm becoming more aware of my heart center and more aware of my body, and also as a team, thinking about how do we have a 3-centered approach. And it was really cool to discover in our conversation, oh, you're a heart type.
Absolutely. Yes, I identify as a 2. I do. I think that's part of what has made this a really compelling combination. It's not lost on me that each of us looking at the same situation through different lenses and having the empathy and ability to share in that with each other really does create, I think, a fascinating dynamic.
Even in our first conversation, you have a sensitivity to the dynamics of the conversation you're in a way that I'm going to just plow forward. Like even before this, I was like, okay, here's how we approach this. Here's the mics. This is what I'm going to do in the room. This is what I'm going to be paying attention to. I'm going to be making notes, and it's all about this action and but you come with these notes, and immediately as soon as you start talking, like the energy kind of settles a little bit. Like
there's more warmth.
Good.
There's more warmth. Yeah, exactly. There's more warmth. Yeah, like there is something about having the head, heart, and body represented. For those who aren't as familiar with that language, the head center is very much thought driven. It's very much it taking in ideas, and at its best, it can expand and combine ideas from different places. And the body center is very action oriented, and it's about what we're going to do. And action oriented people have a do first mentality, but heart centered people really think about impact. They think about depth, and they think about what is the other person experiencing. And I can be so task-driven, I can forget about the experience. And it actually helps me when I learn that and settle into that experience. So regardless, I think not only does it help in a team setting, but something that we want more people to learn is understanding that when you have those different gifts on a team and you appreciate those, you actually find access to that space in yourself. So the heart person in the room gives the body person in the room access to their heart in a way that would not be happening if you were not present.
Oh, interesting.
And that has a huge impact on team dynamics.
Yeah, rather than always trying to be, gosh, as a 7, I really should be more heart-centered. Really work up the heart. Like
Yeah.
it's a good thing for me to do that and to grow in that way. And I've grown, I think, quite a bit in the last couple of years in the space of my own heart.
For sure. Yes, we've witnessed it.
Thank you.
For sure. Absolutely. That's true. It's true.
Thank you, because I put a lot of work into that. But then there's also just people who are natural, like heart types, particularly 2s, very natural in that way. So it does elevate, my own. It awakens my own heart. So I think that was well said, Jim.
And from a heart standpoint, you guys are both good for me in terms of getting out of the potential for staying still in service of making sure everything is okay. And sometimes you just need to move. And to have that, I guess, catalyst to say, it's okay, we'll figure it out. We don't have to know everything right now, including how are people doing? How are they feeling? So I think it really does bring forward a sense of calm in me to know that we are going to take action. I do have someone who's thinking ahead to the work and making sure that it makes sense that we drive in that way. So I see the combination in both ways being really helpful and powerful for each other.
Yeah, and I think that is true in every team across the world. Like you even have it in your own family. Often the family dynamics get together. Yeah. And I think we haven't always known how to name that. But there's something that I've been thinking about recently when you lose people that are close to you. It was a author, an English author, who talked about the 3 friends that he spent the most time with. And when one of them passed away, he goes, I didn't just lose that friend. I lost what that friend brought out of me, and I lost what that friend brought out of the other person in our circle.
Wow.
So he's like, so the loss was actually multiplied because I no longer got access to the part of my other friend that that person brought out. And I think we so often undervalue not just the other person or their experience or the gifts they bring. Like that's one thing that we do need to learn to appreciate more in our families, in our relationships, in our work. But there's also something that we don't even notice that they bring out of us that we would not have access to were they not present.
Well, this is the reason why we believe here as the 3 of us, like we're really committed to team.
Yes.
Because we think that team does that. It brings out, it's so easy for Jim and I, who are both highly individualistic. So you think about on the Enneagram, the 7 and the 8, probably couldn't be more individualistic. It's like,
great. What have I done
it's really sort of like, leave me alone, let me do my work. Or, if I'm going to have fun, I want to have fun with people. But I don't want to be tied down by people in terms of work, really. Or, so we could go on and on about the 7s and how they work. But it's in 8s are even more that way.
Yeah.
Jim and I work excellent together because of that. But we've always known there's something missing.
Sure.
Like there's that glue that needs to bring out something else in all of us. And I think as a team, that's what I have a friend who describes it this way. She's also a professional coach. She says, you can have a team of experts or you can have an expert team. And I think that brings out when we're working together, when we're aware of what the other has naturally as a gift, and we're okay with welcoming that into our lives, I think it brings our game up. I think teams can function at a way higher level if they're actually leveraging the strengths of each other and not sort of like, I've got my job, you've got your job. Now we know we've met together, we've divvied up the responsibility. Now we go off to our silos and we execute. Yeah. I think there's something more, and teams that really function together that way rise much higher, I think.
Absolutely, and there's 2 things that come to mind for me. One is the combination of people create a unique identity and entity in and of itself. So the 3 of us now create an entity of the combination, and coaching that combination is where I do a lot of the work in the team space. So you're no longer speaking to, well, what's my type, what's your type, but what are our collective types and what's good about that combination and what could potentially be derailing. So the entity of the team and how we come together and leverage the individual parts.
I saw that when we talked. That was one of the things that was so fascinating to me, was my starting point is very much the individual.
Sure.
But I'm very team. Like I thinking all the time about relationships. But it was from the starting point of the individual, like understanding you and how you impact other people, and then working from that to benefit the team. And you were starting at the opposite end. Yeah,
which is fascinating. I mean, I started all the way at the organizational end with the change plans and then the team piece about adopting the changes. And what I saw as I began working with more teams is that the teams that excelled were made up of individuals who had a deeper understanding of themselves and who could come together in a very deliberate way. So definitely I have come from down to the level of the individual by seeing combinations of people excel and combinations of people really struggle.
And this is why I thought, okay, this is fantastic, because you and I are coming at complete opposite directions, but we're meeting and there's such an incredible overlap. I don't have to change and become a person that starts at the organizational level and thinks all the way down to the individual. I start at the individual and I work my way up to the organizational. You don't have to change because you start. That's where you start.
Exactly.
I think working together, this could be an incredible, approach for us. That
I
we
agree.
Actually think through.
It's the combination
more
of
broadly,
strengths.
I guess.
Yeah, combination of strengths versus trying to overcome a gap.
Yeah.
I think we do fill in maybe what the other one might not have, and together the collective really comes together.
Yeah, and in work environments too, this has the side benefit of the reduction of ego. There is appreciation where there may have been competition.
Yes. Wow, that appreciation is a big thing. So what I am reminiscing about is this idea of each of us is coming from a different core motivation, and we're appreciating that in each other, and yet in the workplace, it's more likely to be a point of frustration, stemming mostly from a lack of understanding. But I've gotten plenty of feedback over the years of, wow, you just think differently than I do. And in some cases, the right person would embrace that. And in other cases, it would really frustrate them. So, picturing back to teams that I know had all three types, pretty easy to come across. You'd have those who were really visionary who'd say, that's where we're headed. This is why. Let's go. And then you'd have heart types that would say, but wait, why are we going there? What are people going to experience once we get there? And how about the journey along the way? And then you've got the body types who would say, I'm not moving till you tell me how. Or in some cases, they might just start paving the way and not even care what the destination is, which is all good. But for different people, there was usually a push and pull and a frustration. I think sometimes I would be seen as slowing the conversation down in favor of eventually speeding it up, because what I was able to do by asking those questions of, wait, why is this so critical, and what is it going to be like for the people, when it came time to engaging a larger audience and moving the change across the organization, we were fully prepared to address people's concerns. On the flip side, if the person wasn't asking, well, how are we going to get there, we would start on the journey and then eventually say, well, we don't have the right people on the bus. We don't even know if we have enough gas in the bus. And so you'd get stalled on your journey because all you had was the destination and no plan to get there. Mm-hmm. So I really believe they need to be together. And I believe right now, without an awareness around it, it causes more frustration when instead it could really create an acceleration.
Yes, 100%. Because it's not about slowing down. People like me want to move at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
I've tended to move at a rapid pace, but it's been hit or miss. There have been times where it's been an incredible hit.
Sure.
And then that justifies the reason why I should be who I am.
Right.
And then there's been the times that it's been a complete disaster, in which then I just, I put it in the WTF file and keep moving on,
Or it was them. It was obviously them.
Oh, of course it was. It's just that if they had gotten on board, and sure, I have a million of them. I have a million justifications, or I just ignore it. But the best experiences I've had, which, by the way, has turned out to be the fastest and most efficient. The funny thing about being speedy is you think you're going to get to your destination and win. So I've got this competitive side.
Sure.
Super fast. I want to win. I want to be ahead. But when I'd get there, I'd also realize nobody was with me, right? And so I didn't actually succeed at the higher level that I wanted to succeed at.
Yeah.
So when we've done it the right way, there has been more efficiency because there were people who were planners and who were thinking ahead and thinking about all the ways that this could go badly. Or people that were thinking about, are you bringing other people with you? Because if you want to get there, don't you want everybody else also to get there with you? Yeah. So that way it's the whole organization. It's an organizational win.
Yes.
Versus just an individual win. So I mean, it's just like it's just all of this stuff that then you think, right? So actually, I could be counterproductive. The very thing I'm trying to achieve, I could actually ruin through my personality simply because I, one trick pony. It's like speed. That's it. Yeah. You just move fast. Now we're thinking much more in terms of, do you really want to win?
Right.
Do you really want to succeed? Because if you do, you have to have these other components in there. Then that means the ego, right? My ego is a 7. I have to think about so slowing down, patience, process, and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I don't have to have all that. I just have to be able to welcome the gifts around me, right? And work with them in the process towards that destination.
I have a mentor that always says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, it's an old African proverb.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. There has been a little too much emphasis on the omnicompetence, necessity to have omnicompetence instead of a more eclectic competence. And I think if we can grow in eclectic competency, then we have a lot more potential in a world that is increasingly influenced by globalization and technology. I think you need the right tools for that job. And I think the increased popularity of the Enneagram in the corporate world, and I mean, it's football teams using it. There's the Enneagram Prison Project, which we've had Susan Olesic on. It's impacting all of these different worlds because this tool is emerging as the needs for it are emerging ever more so.
Yeah, I can see that. And what's changing in the landscape in corporate America is the way that we're structuring our organizations. So historically, the hierarchy was the way to organize around a set of employees. And the way to progress was to move up. And to move up meant taking on larger and larger teams. And today, what we're seeing is that hierarchy doesn't allow for the innovation and for the new ways of working that are required to keep pace with the future of work. And so teaming is really what companies are moving towards. But to do that, defining success is different. The newer generations, I often hear them say things like, I'm not so worried about moving up and getting a bigger title. I just want to keep learning. I just want to keep doing meaningful work. I want new and different experiences. And so the model to help them achieve that and to help companies achieve their goals is around being more agile and more team-based. And to be team-based, well, the Enneagram is a perfect way to help people very quickly mobilize around the goals that they're trying to achieve, but also relate to one another so that they can achieve them in an interconnected way.
So in your opinion, is like the old hierarchy, is it was stable but slow?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to trying to keep people aligned and information would also flow in one direction, maybe always, hopefully up, sometimes down, but information was pretty stagnant when it came to collaboration. And so the hierarchy, there certainly are times when that does make sense, but it is not allowing for the speed of information, the speed of innovation, and to keep up with the speed of change.
I heard I think it was on Radio Lab, they were talking about how these teams of scientists, they have a phrase where they say, we need someone on the team who has the ketchup bottle in a different spot. Because if you grew up in Western white family, you tended to keep the ketchup in the refrigerator. But if you grew up in a lot of other cultures, including African American cultures, it was kept in the cupboard, not in the refrigerator. When they would get stuck on a problem, they're like, well, we need to bring in someone who puts the ketchup in a different place. Because there's this mentality of if we're going to have the kind of speed and agility that you're talking about, you need someone with a different cultural background, a different perspective, a different personality, a different variation in their temperament. And they can often find the solution, especially in an agile world, that would be missing if it's not there.
Yeah. A lot of times people will bring in the non-expert because they can look at the same problem through a new lens that the experts are missing. You become blind to what you don't know and only rely on what you do know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what we're talking about, too, is sort of what's been talked about for a long time now is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
The capacity to know what's happening internally and to be aware of your own emotional reactivity, but also to pay attention to other people and that intelligence around communication and around conversation that is so critical today, more so than ever before. You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Definitely. The emotional intelligence conversation has been happening for 20 plus years. And I still think there are people who don't necessarily understand why do I need to focus on that. Those hopefully are not the leaders that are taking on bigger and better challenges. But there's still a conversation around why do I need to invest in that? They may understand the need for it, and I find that people think they're pretty good at it, when in reality, they might not so much. They might have a blind spot to it. It almost sounds like, yes, I've got EQ, I'm good. Yeah. When in reality, it's something that we need to continually cultivate and challenge ourselves to go deeper with. So the conversation is out there, and it's happening in the right places. It's just not. You would think it would be further along and more pervasive than it is. And part of me wonders if that's because there hasn't been a tool like the Enneagram to help people really get clear on themselves. What I have found as a 2, I love this work. I think this work is fantastic and amazing, and not everybody has loved some of the work that we've needed to do as a team. Like they sort of see it as a necessary evil, but not something that they get excited about.
And barely necessary.
Yeah, barely necessary. And not something that they get excited about the day that you have a workshop. And for me, what I'm noticing with the Enneagram is every type seems to really embrace it. And I don't know whether that's because everybody is now feeling like they're understood. As a human being, we all want to be understood, I believe. And yet there's something about the Enneagram that makes people want to use it in arenas where I've tried other tools that people aren't interested in leveraging. So I think there's a deeper conversation around EQ because we haven't necessarily unlocked the right way to help people do that inside of corporate America.
Well, I think one of the reasons is a lot of the people who have been leading are these like head and body types. And I know that a lot of leaders are 8s because they just tend to end up in leadership roles wherever they go. It was funny, the organization I was in prior, I think I was, this may have been almost 10 years ago, that the head of the organization and I were having lunch. And he said, well, we all have blind spots. And I was like, yeah. As far as I was concerned, I take the right action, I move in the right direction, what's the problem? Like that was still the underlying narrative. And he's like, but well, you kind of lack emotional intelligence. And I was just dumbfounded. I was just, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And so like I started like reading these books and all this stuff and I'm like, what are they talking about? This is insane. And I think one of the reasons I care so much about like the Enneagram and seeing this work and seeing emotional intelligence grow is because I had to do it all intentionally, where a lot of people I think come to it naturally. I think when you don't come to it naturally and then you're forced to learn or you're going to like be severely capped in your capacity to operate in the world, you start to value it more, then it does open up a whole new world. And I've told people now, like, you grow in emotional intelligence, you will grow in your impact, your income, whatever you want to call it, all of those different areas.
Yeah.
If you can grow in emotional intelligence, you will grow in those areas. But it's not just emotional intelligence. Like, even think of that phrase. It still has the word intelligence in it. Like, it's still centered as an intelligence. It was like, well, it's not all IQ, like intellectual intelligence, but it's like emotional, but it's still intelligence.
Right.
But it actually is much more wisdom. Like the sign in sign language, the sign for knowledge is a K on the forehead, right? But it's very much a knowledge kind of thing. The sign for wisdom is a W that sweeps up through the body and the head. It starts in low at the gut. It sweeps up through the heart and then into the head.
Wow.
That's the sign for wisdom. And I think what the Enneagram is trying to do is it's trying to be in the wisdom tradition of actually engaging the gut and the heart and the head, where it's not just an intelligence, but it is a wisdom that sweeps through all three.
That's an amazing visual. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Sorry, that's not on camera, folks.
I know, right? Well, you hit on something that I see a lot happening when people step into new leadership roles. And that's the idea of you've been an individual contributor, you have done really well in the capacity of your strengths and the area of expertise that you have. And so you've moved up the ranks inside of the individual contributor model to the point that it's time for you to become a leader or a manager. And at that point, there is no manual that you're given. To all of a sudden do this job with as much success as you did in your individual area of expertise. And now you're confronted with a lot of feedback you'd never received before. So before, when you were getting really great marks in terms of the work you were doing, leading others is a completely different art. And the feedback that most new leaders get is around what you talked about. It was your emotional intelligence or your approach to other people. Yeah. And so I see an opportunity for people in new leadership positions, and it might be your first leadership or it might be going from a mid-level leader to a senior level to an executive level. Each of those leadership transitions brings with it the need to get even more clear on who you are and how you want to show up, but even more able to understand your people and how to what motivates them and how to tap into their core motivations. So for me, the Enneagram at the different leadership transitions would be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, there's so many places. I'm always thinking about the Enneagram as that lens through which you see. It's a different lens. You now see all parts of the organization through and all needs through that lens. Yeah. So people say, well, when you coach, do you coach about the Enneagram or do you coach people's issues and what they're dealing with? I got to ask that question. And I thought, oh, right, because in some models, it's about learning that system as opposed to that system then becomes almost translucent. You're seeing through it at other things, and now you're seeing with a different viewpoint. And that's what makes it so ubiquitous. I mean, you can use it for leadership development, right? So if you're thinking about leaders that are maybe a type, let's say you're like yourself, a type 2 leader. No, it's not a type 3 that tend to be CEOs or type 8s that tend to be CEOs. You're a type 2. So your leadership style is going to be different. That doesn't mean it's not going to be as effective. It's going to be effective, but it's going to be through leveraging your unique strength as a 2, your superpower. And so Jim and I have talked about this with the different superpowers that each one possess. If you know how to leverage that, if you're aware to that, and then we go even deeper and talk about even the subtype of your type. Yeah. The sort of instinct, whether you're self-preservational, social, or sexual, and learning to leverage that. You can lead that way, but people try to lead the way they think you're supposed to. You just brought that illustration, someone who's been a fantastic employee, producer, and well, you've been producing at a high level. We're going to put you as a manager so that the team produces that way too. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to try to teach people the way they are motivated and driven, but they don't know yet that they have a superpower that's genuinely theirs. And then also tuning into what's everybody else's on my team, and how do I help them rise through their type as opposed to trying to be something else. So that's a big part of, I think, that emotional intelligence we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's so many different directions we could take this, and there's so many different things that we could explore, but we wanted to kind of take a broad shot and just see where this conversation took us. One, to introduce people to Suzanne, but then also ease into this conversation about work and teams and all of the really important things that happen when we get that right, and all the potential that we can reach if we get that right. So we covered some good ground there, but I don't know if there's any last things you wanted to hit.
Yeah, I think this one feels pretty complete. And
feels
we can
good.
Go deeper. There's a lot of stuff we can go deeper on in the next one.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. I know it's like this was easily could be hundreds of episodes, but
which it will be.
Here's one. Here's one for you. All right.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for joining us. Like I said at the top of the episode, if you would like to join us for either or both of the webinars we have coming up on the next 2 Thursdays in a row, you can register for those at theartofgrowth.org. If you're curious about what it would look like to have our team come into your organization and do some training, some consulting, please contact us and we can set up a call to investigate what that would look like for you. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Also, if you leave us a review on iTunes, it helps people find the show, and it's a huge help to us. This show is produced by me, Jim Zartman, at Talkie Record Studio in Lynn, Massachusetts. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.